What is the word, everybody? Whew. Last few events have been a heater. I'm excited. I'm super pumped. I'm leading the championship. I feel super stoked. Obviously, we had a couple gimmies at the end, but hey, I mean, that's just literally a testament to show that how important your team is. And man, it's crazy. The team is so good. I've never even imagined a group of people that could be working together and be that good. There's always like the guy who is picking up slack for someone else, or the guy who is, has an attitude, the guy, like everybody, they all have all that, but they're all there for the common good of winning. Like, it's crazy. Sorry, I just wanted to share that because I'm like on cloud nine with the team, the car, and everything about like our program is just absolutely killer. But today I'm here to talk about grip. Grip tune, bro. Grip. Oh, I got so much. My shit's so hooked up, dude. It's ripping. Or, damn, dude, we out here skating. We cruising. Or, yo, man, I don't do that. Like, I'm just here to drive for fun, yo. Or, yo, where are you at? I just dragged your ass. Or, damn, dude, like, your car's so slow, I can't even chase you. Or whatever the case is. It's all about setting your car up for every event that you drive. I go and drive local events. I know my car is super hooked up. I free it up so we can all drive together and we can all have fun. I get in the same car and I know I'm gonna go drive with a bunch of FD ding-dongs that are always hooked up and driving like assholes. Guess what? I'm showing up with my car hooked up. I'm going to drive some event I've never driven before. I'm showing up with my car in the middle because I don't know if I need it or I don't. And why? Because I want to, be able to put a good show on, have fun, put the car exactly where it needs to in my lead run and not roll away from people. And also, I want to be able to door everyone. Nothing ever for me is worse than showing up to an event and having a car that can't keep up with people. That is like the worst, because then they're like, every chase that I do is like, oh, I can't get on his door. I can't catch him. I have to cut the line so much to keep up. I have to, all these things just to be able to dive in and stay on his door. So obviously there's limitations to this grip talk. And the limitations to me are how much tire you can fit on your car, how much power your car has, and the weight of your car. Those three things together are kind of what set up how aggressive you can apply what I'm about to talk to you about, which is the grip tune, bro. It's so funny. Like 2 years ago, somebody I think it was Evan Brown, Item B. I think he was like, oh, I got my grip tune in or something. He might have been making fun of me. I don't know. But when he said that, I was like, grip tune, dang, that's funny. Like, because it's like video game thing where you're like tuning levels. And it's like the grip tune. But to me, like a grip tune would be like a road race setup or a time attack setup. But anyways, moving forward, we're going to talk about the things that add and remove grip to your car and how they do that. Man, I don't even know where to start. There's so many things. There's a huge balance, okay? So please, 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 when you watch this video and you want to apply this to your car, do one thing at a time. Do not just do everything I tell you to do. That's not how it works. It's all a balance of everything. And I'm sorry that I won't get super, super in depth with this, and I'm going to keep it basic because even all the way till FD, if you are A, on a good tire, B, in a powerful car, and C, your car is at the correct amount of weight for your tire, because we have to be, these adjustments will win an event for you, like you don't have to get crazy in depth. Like, don't overthink this stuff. Okay, here we go. We're gonna start with the rear of the car and we're gonna talk about shocks, because that's my favorite thing. I have BCs on all my stuff. Their stuff is definitively adjustable to the point where I'm making one-click changes at a track to help me in my FD car. In my street car, on my fun cars and my demo cars and all that, I might be doing 4 or 5 sweeps because the car is usually free enough that I can just pound more grip in it and it's fine. So here's how we're gonna go. Shocks in the rear of the car. The softer you go with the rebound, which is controlling the speed of the shock, okay? There's a fly in here. My dog keeps coming in and out, and she has her own way of opening and shutting a human door, as long as it's not latched. Anyways, so shocks in the rear. The softer you go, which means the less control of compression and rebound on your shock, because most of you have one-way adjustable shocks, which is what you should have. 2 ways and 3 ways are totally unnecessary until you understand everything in this video and you've done everything in this video and you want some more control. So that knob on the top does 25%, 30% compression and 65, 75% rebound adjustment. So depending on the type of shock it is, whatever, it's always going to do a little bit more rebound than compression, which is actually what you want because you want a little bit more control as you're bleeding out that compression. Compression is obviously compressing the shock. Rebound is obviously expanding the shock. And that's controlling the spring that you're running, because you already watched my spring rate video and you already know what you need for spring rates. Or at least you've been figuring that out. So softer on the compression, which is usually counterclockwise, is slow or is making it so it has less control over that spring, right? So softer, lots more movement. Stiffer, a lot less movement. That movement is what gives you instant grip and some mid to exit turn grip. So adjusting that shock is going to give you a lot more drive, which is forward grip. And when I say forward grip, I don't mean forward as in the front tires. I have so many people that message me that when I say forward drive and they start talking about the front tires. I'm like, no, forward drive is when you're on the gas and you're driving in the direction of the rear tires. So when you're in drift and you're sideways, it will go this way. And that is the forward traction of the car. So softer, more forward traction. It's gonna give you more instant traction than it will mid and late turn traction. But softening the knob, more grip. Raising the knob, less grip. That is pretty much exactly and to the T how it works on pretty much every car. So if you show up to the track and your stuff's full soft and you're out there and you're having trouble linking the track, just put some clicks in the shocks, dude. It'll free it up a little bit. It'll still be able to reach the same speed at the end of the turn within reason. It's gonna make it easier on that hit. So if you're out there and you're a type of person that feels like they want a lot of instant grip because they drive at the very edge of everything, then sure, your shocks are gonna be softer. Allow that spring to move, allow that weight to transfer more. If you are someone who likes to float the car a little bit more and use momentum and drive the car off the speed, you might have more shock put in the car, but you might be faster than the guy who has less shock in the car. So just think about that when you're driving around the track and you feel that. If you want more instant grip, more basically pedal response to how much grip you have, then softening the shocks. That's pretty much the shocks in the rear. In the front, the shocks control your roll stiffness. Roll stiffness is meaning how stiff the front of the car is in roll, okay? Obviously that does a lot of roll bar adjustment too. It also controls, the shocks control the pitch of the car under braking. A little less concerning with drifting. We're not doing a lot of braking. So I always recommend having the front a little bit stiffer than the rear, probably 30% on the clicks. You don't have to move them together or anything, but as a baseline, usually about 30% stiffer on the shock, compression and rebound, the knob at the top. And what that's gonna do is you don't want the car in the front to move a lot, okay? You want the car in the front to give you good steering feel and good control over that shock and, over that spring. You don't want it to be bouncy. You don't want it to be anything like that. You want good control over it. And your car runs everything over with the front and then the back. But here's the deal. When you're on the gas, the weight is off of the front. It's not very much weight on the front. So you want to be able to have that control over the front. So A little bit stiffer on the rebound and compression on the front knob. That way there's more control over that spring. It's not bouncing, it's more planted, okay? Too much dampening will cause really fast movements, okay? So if you're in drift and you're going over stuff and your front end's really fast movements, that's usually the fact that the spring can't really absorb it or move it because you've got too much, okay? Too little means the car's rolling over and doing slow wheel movements, maybe even wheel hop, like the suspension's not shaking, it's actually the wheel moving, not enough control over the spring. So we want to make sure that we are in the middle of that, right? So obviously 30% more than the rear. If you're showing up to the track with 15 clicks of rear shock in the car, and this is a new car and you're setting it up and driving, I would be right at about 22 or 24 in the front shocks, 22 probably. Clicks from zero, from soft. I'm going everything from soft, not hard. I don't know, that might be backwards for what you're doing. But so basically we want to do that. We want to show up with more in the front than the rear. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. In the front, if you feel like when you steer in, it doesn't have good instant response, okay? If you're someone who steers very quickly, okay, then you're gonna need more dampening in the front to control that. If you're someone who steers it slow and moves slow movements, you can have less dampening and do the same thing, okay? Because you're controlling that instant movement. You're controlling that spring movement. So someone who steers slow or a big, fat, open track that's huge might be able to get away with something that has a little bit less of that shock adjustment than someone that's very fast at steering, because you want that control over the spring, and your steering body roll, you want to control that. Okay, also, not to jump straight into sway bars, but this is another thing that goes with the shocks. A bigger bar, in theory, will need a stiffer shock setting. A stiffer spring will need a stiffer shock setting to do the same control over that, right? Because the shock is controlling that spring. So basically, if we're going into detail on the actual sway bar and all that shit, when you put a sway bar on a car, you would want to go up in your dampening before you go out and then adjust accordingly from there, because you want that control over that. And mainly we're talking about the front at this point. For the rear, you can obviously overpower it in other ways, but in the front, bigger bar, you're gonna want more control over that dampening. For the rear, like I said, it's a balance of like what you like and how you feel it and how much power you have and all that. We'll touch on the bars, but in the front, if you go to a stiffer setting in your bar, adjust your dampers. Now we're gonna jump in and talk about sway bars. Obviously, we touched on it a little bit there. So sway bars, they control roll. They're called an anti-roll bar. They're called a stabilizer bar. They're called lots of different things. I think that you should always have a sway bar on your car until you've sized it down enough to not need it. Now, not needing a bar is pretty much, in my eyes, completely unnecessary in the front. I think you always have to have a bar in the front to control the roll stiffness, like we were talking about. But in the rear, there are some cars, and when you're trying to maximize what your car can do, removing a rear bar will maximize that. But it also removes a tuning tool from the car. So we're gonna start out by talking about rear sway bars. So the stock factory rear bar on your car is probably pretty small, but it's probably the right size bar to have if it were adjustable, right? Because we wanna have that tuning tool. By getting rid of the bar completely, we lose a tuning tool. You only have bar connected and bar disconnected, which if you have those two, that's good. But you should always have the bar there in case you have to hook it up. And even with 1,400 horsepower and a huge fat power band in my FD car, we have to hook the bar up at tracks in the back. And our bar is very small, but that amount of bar controls how much sideways grip you have. And by sideways grip, I mean the amount the car can actually slide and the amount the car on throttle can add angle. So if you have no bar on the back of your car, the car will want to go to angle, and then you'll pick up the gas and it wants to remove the angle. And then maybe you can get it to add it back, but the initial hit is like, and you're kind of dancing on the fact that you can't add angle to the car. Now you hook a bar up, and let's say, we'll just use a generic number of a 200-pound bar, which would be like a stock bar on most cars. You can now get on the gas, and when you get on the gas, it will maintain that angle because that roll bar on the back is keeping the chassis flat or flatter so that the car doesn't lean over when you're on and off the gas. So now like all of those movements that you make on and off the gas are controlled more. So with no bar, your movements are like this, let's say, okay? And with a bar, your movements are like this. So it's a stabilizer bar. It's stabilizing the back of the car. So if you have a car that feels very loose all the time, meaning you feel like you're always over-rotating, and no matter what you do, you have an over-rotation or you're trying to balance the car, obviously softening that bar and running a smaller bar or moving it to a farther hole away from the bar itself, softening it is going to add some more of that back because the car can roll some and the car can absorb some more weight on that side of the car. And also obviously it wants to lift this wheel a little bit because it keeps the car stabilized. So as you're doing that, and the bigger or smaller of the bar will affect how much grip you have in a sideways fashion. It's called side bite. So that's why a lot of people in the rain don't run a rear sway bar. They don't do any of that stuff because they're trying to get as much as they can grip-wise, you know? So anyways, what I'm saying is having the bar is always important because if you drive the same track all the time, cool, you can set it up however you want. You drive the same track. But like I leave a rear bar on all my cars and typically have an adjustable rear bar on all of my cars because I like to drive my car at its maximum all the time. And sometimes not having a bar is too much. It makes it too hard to drive. I can't drive with the angle that I want. I can't reach the zones that I want, and I have to affect other things and adjust other things when I could just potentially adjust the sway bar. So anyways, long story short, for the rear, the stiffer the bar, the easier the car is going to slide. The in oversteer, the more stable it's going to be, but the less grip it's going to have in theory. Now, softer the bar, starts adding the grip, starts adding that sideways grip. But if you start adding too much of that and the car when you get on the gas, wants to reduce angle and come back again and you're fighting that, it's too much bar. I mean, it's too little bar. You got to add more bar to it to balance it out. A lot of guys will say they don't run a sway bar in the back. Totally get it. I understand 100%. But also, when you go from your little track that's in a parking lot or Pat's Acres or any of these kart tracks that you have plenty of power for, and you go to an oval track and you struggle on the bank because now you need a bar because it's a big sweeper and your horsepower to tire to weight ratio is skew, that sway bar can make it so that you can actually drift the bank and not just come down off the bank or reduce angle on the bank and make it super tough. So not telling you guys how to set up the cars completely, but rear bar frees the car up at angle, simply said. Front bar, talked about roll stiffness earlier. The roll stiffness of the car and how it wants to pitch itself over, okay? Some people don't run a front bar because they like to have a ton of front grip. And they drive the car all off of the steering itself. I totally understand that. But also, if you had a front bar on your car, you could adjust your car to make the car easier for you while it still had front grip, obviously. Now, the other end of it is a maximum huge giant front sway bar that is like an I-beam, right? So now when you hit a bump on this side, it moves this side. It's so stiff. There's no like slow movement. It's just I-beam, right? Driving a car like that is really a nightmare because you don't have any grip in the front, hardly at all, because it's so stiff and so nuts that you're using the tire like as your suspension. So there's extreme cases for those kind of things. If you have a lot of horsepower and you drive the car off the rear, you can have a really big front bar. And what the really big front bar is going to do is give you a lot of stability in the front and a lot more rear grip, mainly because as you turn the wheel, as you move, it's putting more and more grip on the back of the car. Not easy to drive. I do not recommend that to anybody. What I do recommend is having a good size front bar that is balanced. Now, let me give you the extreme examples of not having a bar versus having a bar. Not having a bar. all of your transitions and everything that you do will require your steering to be absolutely perfect. Meaning, when you go from drift from one side to the other side with no sway bar, both tires will be on the ground at the entire time and have maximum amounts of grip. So during the transition, if you don't have that steering perfect, it will bobble, it will wobble, it will do all sorts of things because both tires are touching the ground the entire time. The bonus of not having a front bar that I can think of, only one I can understand, is that at no point of any of your steering does the rear grip change at all. Okay, so when you have no bar in the front, there's no real any weight jacking. We talked about this in the previous video with the alignment and all that stuff. If the car has no jacking, it can be like linear and momentum wise can be the same, where you're on the gas, you're driving it, everything is good. With a bar, though, you do have some of that. So if you don't like having more grip at high angle, or you don't like having the car start driving forward, that forward grip that we talked about, then you might not want to run a front bar. That is the explanation, the only one I can really think of, which actually makes sense for some drivers. If you are watching this video, you don't have a front bar, and you're like, yeah, that's how I like to drive, I would still put a front sway bar on and try it because you might like it. But I do have an understanding of that, of why you wouldn't run a front bar with that. Now, what I was saying about the front bar is you do want to, in my opinion, you want a front bar to be able to adjust that, okay? Really high angle track, like let's say Pat's Acres, where you're just lots of angle and slowing down, lots of angle, slowing down. Having a front bar on the car will help at each one of those transitions. It will smooth it out. It will make it so your steering doesn't have to be precisely perfect, because as you're at angle this way, this tire is light. And then when you go through the transition, it plants the tire and then takes weight off this side, right? So it's very linear swoop of grip through the transition. And having too much grip in the transition, to me, makes it so it has to be perfect. And like, none of us are gonna be perfect in every transition. At least that's how I feel. So that front bar is adding that stiffness, stopping the car from rolling over. So it's gonna give you stability in the front steering. And if you watched my previous video on how to align the car and the sweep and all that for caster and camber, basically it'll make it so that it's very linear and good feeling through the transition. Too big of a front bar does reduce front grip, but it also gives you more instant stability with the grip because it doesn't have to roll over first before it does the adjustment. It's just there, and the tire is just all the time. But also it's so stiff, it can be so stiff in the front that it's only suspension movements are the tire, so you don't want that. So I always typically say for a drift car, for running the stock style bar, meaning the stock shape, not a blade bar or anything, I would just run pretty much the biggest bolt-on front sway bar, because it won't be enough to get to that point where it's gonna pogo the front end. So that's my advice, and it's usually adjustable. It has 3 adjustments on it usually, and you can make those fine-tooth adjustments for how you feel. You know, if you feel like it's getting some push in the middle of the turn, like we were talking about, you just pull it back 1 setting and then it's dialed. You know, or maybe it takes 2 settings, but you also have your tire pressure to play with and your shock to play with. So those balances together, just removing the front bar, I feel like you just lose a tuning tool. My example is I drive cars without front bars all the time, and I always just feel like everything I do with the steering wheel is so important that I don't look good on track because I'm wobbling or I'm doing weird things. Now, there are people in FD that run no front sway bar, but they are really, really good. And they are really, really smooth. And they are really precise. It's just a different type of style for driving. And I feel like typically the best situation is to have one on the car and have that adjustment and have it be there. I mean, worst case scenario, you go somewhere and you disconnect the bar and you're like, oh, I love this. I mean, you're definitely giving up some other things, but if you love it and it's gonna make you comfortable in the car, like I said, that's the most important thing. A comfortable driver is the best driver. You're gonna do your best driving when you're the most comfortable. Okay, so we got shocks done. We got sway bars done. What else we got? Alignment, we talked about alignment stuff in the last video. We talked about, I'll just do a short one. In the rear, the grip aspect of it, like we were saying, you add toe into the rear, it will basically give you more drive, but make the car harder to drive. So I always take that as a last resort. You've already adjusted the shocks. You've already adjusted your sway bar. We've done tire pressure. I need to touch on that. The toe in is last resort. And if you are going to have toe in, I mean, it's up to you on how you want to do it, whether you want to do it over control, like moving the pickup points on your arm so it toes in under compression, or if you want to add it static. That's up to you. You got to figure that out on your own. But yeah, so you can add toe to put more grip in the car, but it just gets harder to drive. So last resort, in my opinion. In the front, like we talked about with the toe and the Ackerman, you want more grip at lock, more steering feel at lock. Sorry, let me rephrase that. More grip at lock, less steering feel at lock. You can go closer to zero Ackerman. That will also make you run a wider line throughout the turn and make the steering be able to move the car. So if you're someone who likes to drive out to the wall and then power away from it, I would not add Ackerman. I would not go closer to zero Ackerman in your adjustment, because that's going to put you into the wall. If you're someone who has trouble reaching the wall, and you've always had trouble reaching the wall because you're steering and you're doing all that, then sure, that inside wheel and how much it has is going to change the angle of that. And change the angle of the attitude of the car. What else? Tire pressures. Cool. So tire pressures is kind of a tricky thing because it's a balance of that. We talked about the forward drive. We talked about the side bite. Those two things together as a combination, basically in the tire, you can lower the tire pressure, but how it reacts to the forward and side is totally different for every car, every tire, everything. So let's say you have a tire, Let's say you have a tire that's a 235 40 17. So that tire at 30 pounds of tire pressure might have a contact patch that is this big, okay? As you lower the tire pressure, the contact patch gains in size, okay? That's how it creates more grip. The tire gets bigger as you lower the tire pressure. What it does do, though, which is a negative and a positive if you know what you're doing, is just lower the tire pressure, the softer the sidewall gets, the more movement of the sidewall. So as you lower it, you start losing that sidewall structure. It starts getting a little harder to drive. So the lower the tire pressure typically means the more on throttle grip you will have. Now, to a certain point of lowering that, you will be gaining grip globally. Once you get down below a certain pressure, I don't know what that is on your tire, but you will lose off throttle grip. And that's even more of exponentially more as you add grip to the tire, because you're going faster. You're picking up more speed. So when you lift, it's going to feel freer anyway, even though it might not be any freer, just because you have more speed. Freer, I mean looser. So obviously the lower the tire pressure, I'm sure most of you guys have gotten this already, but lower the tire pressure, the more grip you're going to have. Obviously it does get to a point too where it doesn't gain any grip and it will debead the tire, and you could lose a wheel or a battle or crash your car or whatever. So as far as tire pressures go, I always try to make every car work at like 25 pounds of tire pressure. I feel like if you have good power, you can keep sizing up your tire until that works at 25. I think the tire is the most happy at 25. When you start going below that, it starts to get a little bit of a crapshoot on what's going to drive and how well it's going to drive and how squirmy it's going to be and all that stuff. So in the front, the tire pressure works very similar. If you like a lot of response and steering feel, and you're not as worried with the grip aspect of it, a higher tire pressure will work. If you like to drive at a lot of angle and you drive a lot of throttle and you're very committed, a higher tire pressure will work. There's two different reasons to run tire pressure the way it is. First reason is the setup aspect of it. Second reason is the crashing aspect of it. And you have to balance those, okay? So balancing it off the size that will work with your car, with the type of tire it has to be, like grip-wise, and the pressure that you're gonna run. So if you have a car that can't fit a really big front tire and you're limited on tire size, then I would start with something that's a little bit stickier in the front, okay? Also, the stickier the compound, the stickier the tire is, the higher the tire pressure that you can run. The higher the tire pressure that you run, the more linear the tire is, meaning like the grip will be the same across the board and there's a lot less movement of the tire. So I always tend to put every car on whatever tire it needs to run at about 40 pounds. Because 40 pounds of tire pressure, sidewall is gonna be stiff and solid. The tire's not doing any weird deformations at 40 pounds. And then also the second part is the crashing part. In order to have grip when you're trying to stop, the compound does that more than the tire pressure does, right? In steering, when you're moving and you're going lock to lock, the tire pressure does more than the compound. So it's kind of a backwards thing on that aspect. So finding a balance, and like I said, I run about 40 in the front of some of my cars. I've also driven cars that have a lot of front grip because of how they're set up, and there's not an easy way to fix that because it's a geometry thing versus the kit they have and whatnot. I've also ran 100 pounds of tire pressure in the front of a car because if it has so much grip in the front that you can't overpower the car, you can't have any sort of slip in the front. We get back to what we were talking about, having no front sway bar type of thing, where you're like, every little movement that you do is so sensitive. And then when you go to lock, it can't drag the fronts. So the car wants to just pivot, like it's driving like this, like, cause there's so much grip. Whereas like now you remove some grip and you can go like this now and move. Like you're not pivoting, you're actually, like you're not pivoting around this, you're actually pivoting the car like this, you know, more towards the center of the car. So again, first thing being, you wanna get the tire that fits on your car, gets full clearance, lock to lock, gets what you need. And typically you wanna run the biggest tire you can to do that. And the diameter is more important at high angle. You know, I'm not gonna talk about that actual setup aspect of it, just the grip aspect. Obviously, the bigger the tire, the more grip. The softer the compound, the more grip. And the higher the tire pressure, the more response, but less grip. So it's a balance of all those things. So if you're gonna go do backies somewhere and drive like a maniac, you wanna have less front grip. You wanna air those fronts up a ton, okay? Because you wanna be able to slide the front tires as you're going backwards. But if you go to a track that you're underpowered and you're having super hard time maintaining angle on the bank, let's say you're like, you know, on a huge bank track and you only have 300 horsepower, and like that's something that you would start putting more grip into the front, because now you need to like just try to keep it at angle and keep steering the best that you can. If you have a lot of power, obviously, you probably need less front grip. You can just power through it and blow the tires off. Now, front to back grip. You don't ever want something that's more grippy in the front than the rear. You always want something that's, you know, slightly less grip in the front than the rear. So if you're running the same tire front to back, you know, having a 30 mil difference, 40 mil difference in tire size front to back is perfect. No problems there. If you have to run a way smaller tire in the front than the back, you can run a stickier front tire. We're just trying to keep it balanced. Too much front grip, like I said, is gonna make your car wobble, gonna make it tough to have high angle transitions and keep it. So you wanna be able to balance that. Not enough grip obviously causes understeer, you know, and initially, if you don't have enough front grip, I would always say to drive the car harder and into every turn get more angle and to push the car to drive harder. But also at the same time, I understand there is a point where it's not gonna work. Like you probably saw my video with the donuts on the front. I had to drive the car super hard and super gnarly to get it to be able to do everything. And I also couldn't stop. When I wanted to hit the brakes, it would just lock the fronts up. So that's the extreme end, obviously. And I go back and like on that car, I run 235 Nittos, NT05s in the front, and I run them at like 40 pounds of tire pressure. Super linear, super easy to drive. But yeah, so anyways, that's grip. That's how it all works. It's a balance of everything. It's always about, in the rear, it's always about a balance of the tire to power to weight ratio. Lighter car obviously is gonna do everything faster if you're on the same tire. Heavier car is going to be a lot more momentum, a little smoother to drive because everything's not happening as quickly. So obviously there's a balance to all that as well. But yeah, basically overall, that's how you would add and subtract grip from your car and set up your grip tune. And that's pretty much the basics of it. So you can go to the track and go through, and hopefully you took notes on this video, or you can circle back and watch it again when you're at the track and you're having problems. And hopefully this helps you guys dial in your car so that you're happy. It's more important to have a car that is quick and easier to drive than super fast and gnarly and hard to drive. It's definitely overall going to be better to have the easier car to drive that's quick. Cool. Enjoy, guys. Let me know what you guys think. I'm giving all this information out to you guys. Hopefully I'm not overloading you guys, and you can kind of take each thing as a grain of salt. If you've watched this video before my alignment video, you definitely want to go back and watch the alignment video, because that's also going to be very important to when you start adding grip. You need to be able to have the car set up correctly before you start adding grip, or reducing grip. Let me rephrase that. I hope that most of you guys are just reducing grip and making it easier to drive. I wish we could slow down Formula D some. I wish that I didn't have to have a car that was super hard to drive, because it's always so gripped up. And everybody thinks it's a horsepower battle because of the power, when it's not. It's a horsepower battle because of the grip and how everybody keeps finding it and then adding more horsepower to make that grip easy to drive. It's nuts. It's crazy. Like, I'm sure you saw the last round, I did like Manji's the whole way around the entire bank because my nitrous bled out and went to nothing. Solenoid got stuck. That wasn't because I wanted to do that. That was because my car had no chance ever to be able to drift the bank with only 800 horsepower. Not a chance. I would have literally clutch kicked into the turn and crashed straight into the wall. It would have not hooked. It would have barely spun. Wouldn't even have spun the rear tires, to be honest with you. It would have been way too much grip, and we couldn't make any changes because we already basically went out and we had to, commit to the run. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. Comment, subscribe, dislike, like. Like I said, it doesn't really matter to me. Just interact. That's the biggest thing for me, so I know what you guys want to see. I know you guys have been asking for this video for a long time, so don't hang yourselves with it. Go out, enjoy driving, have fun. This video is made to help progress the sport, progress everybody to have better knowledge and understanding of what's happening, and also be able to have you enjoy driving your car and spark up that feeling of like, man, I did these things in my car, let's go try it. Like, think about how many times you modify your car just to get excitement out of it. This is a way to basically not spend any money, just time trying different things and tinkering with it and feeling how all these things work. So hopefully this gives you that direction and that confidence to start changing things and trying things out. And don't battle the grip. Let the grip be enough to make you happy to drive. See you guys.